All right, buckle up, because we're diving deep today into Elon Musk and that wild interview he did on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Episode 2223. Yeah, you know the one.
That's it, hours long. But don't worry, we're going to boil it down to the good stuff. Surprising facts, key takeaways, all that.
It's kind of a classic, right? You get a peek inside Musk's brain. Super casual.
Oh, yeah, it's in front of a live audience, too, right?
Yeah.
They cover so much ground, it's crazy. Climate change, AI.
They talk about it all.
Seriously. That's what makes this deep dive so valuable. Who's got time to listen to all that?
Right.
But one of the things that really struck me was his stance on eating less meat to help the environment. He basically says it's irrelevant. Like, giving up your steak isn't going to make a measurable difference.
It's not that he doesn't care about climate change.
Yeah, he's not saying that.
He's just really making us think about the bigger picture. He says, how do you even measure the impact of, like, one person giving up meat? It's just too complex.
Yeah, that's a good point.
For him, it's about systemic change. It can't just be about individuals making different choices.
That's interesting, and it kind of ties into other ideas he has about how change actually happens. But before we go there, let's talk about why he bought Twitter, which is now X.
Right.
He gets really intense talking about censorship
Hmm.
and how certain narratives are controlled.
On those kinds of platforms.
Yeah, exactly. He brought up specific things, too,
Oh, yeah. Like
how that Hunter Biden laptop story was suppressed,
uh-huh.
and obviously Trump getting banned.
Yeah, he really sees that as a dangerous trend.
Totally. Like some kind of line in the sand.
He kept saying we're on a path where a few powerful people or companies are controlling the information everyone else gets to see. It's like we're headed for trouble.
And he bought Twitter, or X now, I guess, to fight back against that.
Make things more open.
Yeah, have a more open exchange of ideas.
Exactly.
Okay, now this is where things get a little messy. He doesn't hold back about the 2020 election at all. Like,
Yeah.
straight up says it was a major turning point and that there was widespread voter fraud.
Wow.
Seriously.
Does he have any specifics?
Yeah. He points to a bunch of things, like how there was this huge increase in illegal immigration, specifically to swing states.
Hmm.
And then he talks about the Democratic Party and how they're trying to make it easier for illegal immigrants to become citizens and get voting rights.
Right.
Even removing voter ID requirements in certain states,
Ah.
like California.
Oh, so he sees all that as an attempt to influence election results.
Oh, yeah. Like 100%.
I mean, those claims about voter fraud have been disputed a lot.
Sure. But he clearly believes something fishy happened,
Okay.
which is where his distrust of the media comes in.
Ah.
He's super critical of legacy media, he calls it, saying they have this left-wing agenda and spread misinformation. Yeah. And then he talks about how platforms like X are better, more transparent, open to different points of view.
He's a big fan of that community notes feature.
Right. Where users can fact-check things in real time. He's basically saying, don't trust the media, decide for yourself.
It's a very Elon Musk thing to say. It always comes back to transparency.
Definitely. It's not all doom and gloom, though, right? He talks about the future of tech, too. All the stuff his companies are doing with sustainable energy.
Oh, yeah, he's got a lot going on. Self-driving cars, humanoid robots, and AI, of course.
Right, that's where his predictions get kind of crazy. Like, he believes humanoid robots will outnumber humans one day.
Whoa. What does that even look like?
Exactly. Robots everywhere doing all kinds of jobs.
Yeah.
Dangerous ones, chores, all of it.
So humans can focus on other stuff.
Right. More creative work. And then, get this, they actually play around with his AI, Grok. They ask it to tell jokes.
No way.
And even roast certain topics. It gives you a glimpse of how he sees AI evolving. He seems pretty excited about it,
Yeah.
but a little wary, too.
That makes sense. So he's warning us about censorship and maybe elections being manipulated, but then also picturing this sci-fi future with robots and AI. It's a lot to think about.
Well, that's Elon Musk for you, right? Pushing boundaries, shaking things up.
Yeah.
And we've only scratched the surface.
There's a lot more to unpack here.
We'll get to all that right after this.
It's funny how Musk brings up these big ideas about, like, freedom and control, but then he'll connect them to some random event. Like, he tells this whole story about pet squirrels.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
So the government, like, raided this guy's house and euthanized his pet squirrels.
Seriously.
Even though they were domesticated, totally harmless. Musk thought it was absurd.
I mean, Yeah, that sounds crazy.
Especially when you see violent criminals getting released all the time.
Right. No consequence.
Exactly. Musk is like, what are we even doing? He thinks it's a sign of the government overreaching, trying to control people's lives.
Even when it makes no sense.
Right. He even compares it to the movie John Wick.
Wait, really?
Yeah. The guy goes on a rampage because they kill his dog.
Oh, right.
He's saying people love their pets. It's not fair when they're taken away for no reason.
And that connects to his whole point about the government having too much power.
Yeah, and individual liberty. Then things get a little darker. He talks about the Diddy scandal.
Uh-oh. Yeah, that was a rough one.
Pretty disturbing stuff. Musk says a lot of people in music and entertainment knew about Diddy and the child abuse allegations, but they didn't say anything.
Wow. He was basically wondering why there wasn't more outrage.
Right. All these rumors were going around, but nobody seemed to care. He even suggested maybe there was a culture of, like, complicity and silence in the industry.
That's heavy. He compared it to the Jimmy Savile scandal in the UK.
Oh, yeah, that was huge. That TV personality who turned out to be a child abuser.
Yeah. After he died, all this stuff came out.
So Musk is drawing a parallel there.
Yeah, like powerful people can avoid being held accountable, even when they do terrible things.
Yeah.
And he keeps going. He brings up those thousands of kids who disappeared after crossing the border illegally,
Oh, man.
saying a lot of them were probably trafficked.
I mean, that's a really tough subject. He's not afraid to talk about those kinds of things.
No, he's not. Even if it means challenging the mainstream narrative.
It's interesting how he ties all these seemingly random things together. The Diddy stuff, the missing kids, the government taking people's pets.
It's all connected for him somehow.
Yeah. Like there's this pattern of ignoring people's rights and not dealing with serious problems, especially when powerful people are involved. It goes back to his worries about American politics.
He's definitely not optimistic.
No. Thinks the future of the country is at stake and that this upcoming election is make or break. He even said it could be the last real election.
Whoa.
I know, right? His theory is that if the Democratic Party wins, they'll never lose again. They'll make all these illegal immigrants citizens, guarantee themselves future votes, basically turn the U.S. into a one-party state.
He's not a fan of their immigration policies.
No. He claims they're bringing in tons of illegal immigrants on purpose to swing states, to manipulate elections.
Is there any evidence of that?
He points to government data that shows this huge surge in illegal immigration, people being flown into swing states, not even crossing the border the usual way.
That's a serious accusation. And then, of course, there's the push to fast-track citizenship.
Right. He sees that as just a way to get more votes.
To solidify their control.
He called it cheating, said it's happening right out in the open.
And he blames the media for not calling it out.
Ah, right. Back to the censorship thing.
Yep. That left-wing bias he always talks about.
Right.
He thinks it's preventing us from having an honest discussion about these issues. It's like a vicious cycle, right?
Lack of transparency leads to a rigged system, and people lose trust.
Exactly.
He uses California as an example of what he doesn't want to see happen everywhere.
They have that Democratic supermajority, right?
Yeah. And he's not happy about that law that says you don't need an ID to vote. Says it makes voter fraud impossible to prove.
A dangerous precedent for other states. He's worried the whole country will become like California.
With no way out.
Yeah, he really believes the system is corrupt. And then he goes back to the 2020 election and starts speculating about Biden and Kamala Harris.
Wait, what?
He says Biden isn't actually in charge.
Like mentally.
Yeah, and that Harris is the one calling the shots.
That's a bold theory.
He uses Biden's, mental state and the fact that Harris is always campaigning.
As evidence.
Yeah, says picking her as VP was a calculated move to eventually make her president.
Without going through a primary.
Right, just consolidating power within the Democratic Party. He's super suspicious of what's going on behind the scenes. Like, we're not getting the whole story.
So he's skeptical of the official narrative. That's not surprising.
Nope. Thinks we should all be questioning who's really in control.
It fits with his other theories, right? About the Democratic Party trying to grab power.
Totally.
What else?
Oh, and then he goes off on this whole tangent about how inefficient the government is, all the bureaucracy.
And I bet he has some ideas about how to fix it.
He does. He wants to create a new agency, the Department of Government Efficiency.
Okay, that's a pretty straightforward name.
I know, right? But his idea is to streamline everything, cut spending.
Makes sense. He probably thinks the whole system is bloated.
Oh, absolutely. Too many agencies, too many regulations. He thinks it's holding everything back.
So less government is better. I feel like I've heard that before.
Yeah, it's a common theme. But what I thought was interesting was that he even suggested offering severance packages to government employees who lose their jobs.
Really?
Yeah. He was emphasizing that this isn't about punishing people. It's about fixing the system.
That's a good point. It's easy to forget that there are real people affected by these big policy changes.
Yeah. He actually uses this analogy to describe bureaucratic overreach. A football field full of referees.
Whoa, I can't even picture that.
Right. Like, imagine trying to play a game with that many rules. You wouldn't even be able to move.
Makes sense.
That's his point. Too much government interference stifles everything.
Innovation, economic growth, the whole thing.
Exactly.
So his vision is for a more efficient government.
Yeah. Like a business. With accountability.
He is a CEO, after all.
That's true. Then they get to this whole thing about tariffs.
Oh, boy, that's a complicated one.
I know, right? He acknowledges that economists have different opinions on them,
Yeah.
and he's cautious about using them too broadly.
Makes sense. They can backfire.
Yeah, and hurt trade.
Right.
But then he says sometimes they are necessary to protect American industries.
Especially from countries like China.
Yeah, he thinks they're not playing fair.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? Trying to protect your own interests without starting a trade war.
Totally. He seems to think tariffs should be a strategic tool, not a central part of economic policy. He even tells this story about dealing with Chinese suppliers for Tesla.
Oh, wow. First-hand experience.
It shows how difficult it is to navigate global trade and make sure everyone's playing by the rules.
Yeah, real-world stuff, not just theory.
Exactly. And that ties into his whole thing about bringing manufacturing back to America.
Oh, right. He's a big proponent of that.
Huge. Thinks we should be making more things here, not just for the economy.
But for national security, too.
Yeah. If we rely on other countries too much, we're vulnerable.
Especially if there's like a crisis or something. He brought up the COVID-19 pandemic and how all the supply chains broke down.
We didn't have enough medical supplies.
Exactly. So he's making a case for a stronger domestic manufacturing base.
A more balanced approach to globalization. Take advantage of trade, but also be self-reliant.
I mean, that makes sense. It's not black and white.
It's not.
Hmm.
And it all feeds into his big vision for the future. The U.S. leading the way in innovation and technology.
And how do we get there?
Investing in things like sustainable energy, robotics, AI. He talked about Tesla making those humanoid robots.
Right, right. The ones that will outnumber humans.
Eventually. And do all sorts of jobs. Then there's Grok, the AI. They had some fun with it.
Oh, yeah, they were making it tell jokes.
And roast things. It shows how much he believes in the potential of AI.
To change our lives in ways we can't even imagine.
But he's also cautious.
Right. AI could be dangerous if we don't develop it responsibly.
He talked a lot about ethics and planning, making sure AI is a force for good. He even gave a percentage.
For what?
The chance that humans will mess things up with AI. He said 50%.
Wow. So we need to be careful. Think about the long-term consequences.
Absolutely. Technology is powerful. We have to use it wisely. He's excited about the possibilities, but also knows it could go wrong.
Yeah, he's definitely aware of the risks.
It's that push and pull, you know, embracing technology but being cautious at the same time.
That's Elon Musk for you. He's always pushing boundaries, isn't he?
Always. And not just with technology, right? Like his views on climate change, freedom of speech, the role of government.
It's like his whole way of looking at the world is different.
It makes you think. This whole interview, it's not just about the individual topics.
It's about how his mind works.
Yeah, he's grappling with these huge ideas, right?
Yeah.
And he's not afraid of controversy.
He's a bit of a walking contradiction, isn't he? A billionaire CEO who's against government spending.
I know, right?
But then he's also this champion of free speech who's worried about misinformation. Yeah. Optimistic about the future, but scared of what we might invent.
He's like the embodiment of everything going on right now, all the good and the bad.
Exactly. And you never know what he's going to say next.
Keeps you on your toes.
But that's what makes him so interesting, right? He doesn't fit into a neat little box.
He's willing to question everything. Embrace the nuance. And that's refreshing.
Totally. Especially these days when everything feels so black and white.
Yeah, everyone's yelling at each other. It's exhausting.
Yeah. So for everyone listening, why should we even care what Elon Musk thinks?
Well, love him or hate him, he's one of the most influential people on the planet.
His companies are shaping the future. There's no doubt about that.
Transportation, energy, space travel. He's got his hands in everything.
And he's not afraid to stir the pot, that's for sure.
No, he's definitely not shy.
But even if you disagree with him completely,
it's good to understand his perspective.
See where he's coming from, why he believes the things he believes.
It might challenge your own assumptions, make you think about the world differently.
Maybe even inspire you to take action.
Because in the end, we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
It's not just something that happens to us. We create it.
Through the choices we make, the actions we take.
And the conversations we have.
So let's keep talking, keep questioning, keep exploring new ideas.
Even if they make us uncomfortable.
Because the more perspectives we engage with, the better equipped we'll be to build the world we want.
Now, here's something to think about. What if Musk is right about all this AI and robot stuff?
For robots outnumbering humans.
Yeah, what happens then? How do we adapt as a society?
What kind of ethical dilemmas will we face?
And will things like Grok, with its weird sense of humor, actually help us navigate all that?
It's a lot to consider. Maybe we don't have the answers yet.
But it's worth thinking about, because the future is coming, whether we're ready or not.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into Elon Musk and his conversation with Joe Rogan. We hope you found it insightful.
And maybe a little bit mind-bending.
Thanks for listening.